Life doesn't come with an instruction manual.
So we made one.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Maciek.
And this is the Solutions Manual Podcast, your guide to making the most of your life, health, career, and relationships.
Subscribe, leave a comment, and share. Let's dive into our next episode.
Thank you guys for inviting me. This is my first podcast, actually.
All right, cool.
Nice.
Lucky us. So
Lucky you or lucky me, we'll see.
welcome to Solutions Manual Podcast. Awie, why don't you introduce yourself? I think you'll do a much better job than I could.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'm Awie Spies. I'm a biokineticist in Namibia. I'll explain in just a second what that is for people who don't live around here. I've been in private practice now for 7 years and 30 years old this year, so getting on a bit. Starting to feel at the end of the week that the batteries aren't what they used to be. Just a bit of context what biokinetics is. We're basically a hybrid between clinical exercise physiology and kinesiology. So we are trained to do stress ECGs, interpret that in a clinical way, give feedback to cardiologists. But in practice, we mostly work with people with chronic conditions, so diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol patients, and then we see a lot of orthopedic cases as well. So ACL repairs, knee replacements. I've had several ankle fractures over the past few years as well. All sorts, really. And we do sports conditioning as well. I don't think we're as good at that as a kinesiologist or a certified strength and conditioning specialist would be, but that is part of our scope of practice.
Okay, yeah, because that word was new to me too, biokineticist.
Yeah.
So
It's something we spoke about at our annual general meeting yesterday morning, actually, about where we want the profession to go in Namibia.
Mm-hmm.
And the chairman of our association, Dr. Ribosov, actually, I should say, he's very adamant that we should break away from what is being done in South Africa. And then we tend to agree on that front. It's been a profession since, I believe, the 70s or so, registered in South Africa in the early 90s. And we've existed for 35-ish years now, and nobody knows what we do or what we are outside of Namibia and South Africa. So for us to remain relevant as a profession and to evolve into the more globalized health ecosystem, we are going to have to change a few things. So over the course of the next 10 years, we might be called something different. We might not, but the profession is going to be different than it is now.
wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so how did you personally get into this? What's your story, Awie?
So 2011, January, I grew up on a farm, and that specific January, we were working with cattle, and this specific animal that was not too happy with us working with him. So I got a pretty nasty injury from that. Shoulder dislocation, part of my scapula broke, lat tear, longer of the tricep tear, supraspinatus tear, teres major tear. None of this was diagnosed at the time because my parents at the time thought, well, you're not dead, so you can carry on. I didn't see a physio, didn't go to a doctor. So the major symptom that I had was recurring dislocations, to the point where in 2015, while I was still studying physics and applied mathematics, I had to actually get a surgery. And the doctor told me that, yeah, it shouldn't be anything major. If the shoulder is not too banged up, then you'll just have a few small incisions here in the back. And if it's really, really bad, then you'll wake up with a big scar here on the front. And I thought, okay, cool. Yeah, let's hope it's going to be better. And I remember waking up and there's this massive bandage over here. And I thought, oh boy, yeah, this might have been worse than we thought. So lateral J procedure was done in Feb 2015. And during my rehabilitation course, I missed more than 2 months of classes. And you guys know, if you're studying anything in the science field, missing that much is not productive, and you're never going to catch up. So during the rehab phase, working with a physio, working with a biokineticist, I realized that I don't want anyone else to have to go through the same thing that I did. And there's got to be a better way to communicate to patients what is expected of them and what is realistic. So what was told to me was within 4 months after the surgery, I'd be able to lateral raise 12 kilogram dumbbells, which that's not how it works, dude. Like, that's not going to happen. So I thought the expectation that was set of me by the bio was utterly unrealistic. And when we got to 4 months and I could barely use, I think it was the red elastic for lateral raises, and it was still quite uncomfortable. I
Mm.
felt like a failure. And it felt
Yeah.
like I was doing something wrong because the bio said I was going to be able to lateral raise 12 kilograms.
Yeah, and
And
half of that would be an achievement. Yeah, at that time.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I can barely do that now after
Yeah.
8 years of training.
Yeah.
And even for, I would say, an entry-level enhanced lifter using super physiological amounts of testosterone, lateral raising 12 kilograms is heavy, man.
Yeah.
And doing that for reps, I think, is unrealistic for most people. So
Yeah.
setting that expectation of someone who just went through surgery, who I didn't really have a background of a lot of exercise. I played a lot of cricket, and that was my and running and so on. But it wasn't like I was in the gym. We stayed pretty far from town, and it was unrealistic for me to attend the gym anyway. So, home exercises, calisthenics, that kind of thing, did what I could. But setting that expectation of a patient without giving adequate caveats or without explaining that this is an ideal best case scenario. And even then, I think it's a very unrealistic expectation. So what I realized in working with that guy was that I shadowed him later on. I didn't rate his expertise very highly at the time, and I didn't rate it very highly when I shadowed him either. That's besides the point, mostly because of you should be able to tell your patient realistically that this isn't a good situation to be in right now. It might take longer than you think. And setting realistic goals about this is probably going to take a year to get to a point where you can function normally, let alone play
If not
cricket
more.
again without pain. Exactly. So that is something that I've been incorporating in my practice since then, is telling people it the way it is, not what they want to hear. You lose a lot less patients like that.
Oh yeah.
Right. So it's better for their own adherence to what you're trying to help with anyway.
The first thing I tell my patient who's going to do it is, this is probably going to get pretty boring pretty quickly because it's the same 4 movements all the time. Like, what else are we going to do, man? So getting people to understand, especially the type of patients I work with, because there's such a big language barrier, and we'll get into that later as well. But in general, getting someone to understand that the type of muscles that I want you to activate, the neutral position, that already takes at least 2 sessions. Just for them to realize that this is the neutral spot that we've got to be in. And if we can't achieve that, then it doesn't help that we do any type of other exercises, because we're going to be doing it from the wrong starting point, and then we're going to make it worse rather than better. Explaining that to someone with a firm understanding of the English language and an English frame of reference. I'm Afrikaans speaking, and our definitions and stuff is very similar to English as well. So we've got scientific terms, we've got a scientific frame of reference. My lectures at university, the books were in English, but we spoke Afrikaans. So that was it was a little bit difficult to get the understanding of what the Afrikaans word is and trying to make it make sense with English, because it's very different. The frame of reference is still there in the language itself. If you're working with someone who, in their language, there is no word for blue, there is no word for maintenance, there is no word for energy or calories or whatever, then it's almost like trying to explain color to a dog. It's extremely, extremely difficult. Instead of trying to expand what they are capable of understanding, you've got to bring your understanding and your explanation level down to theirs, and keep it as simple and as basic and as relevant as possible to what this person is capable of understanding, so that we can meet each other in the middle enough that I can actually help.
And so just to bring it closer, I think to our listeners, because biokinetics, this is not a term that is commonly used in the United States or Europe or in the Western countries, right? But we know this is not the same as physiotherapy, but it has elements of it. We know it's not the same as personal training, but it has elements of it, right? It doesn't have all the voodoo things, that these kind of fads that people tend to do. And it's a relatively scientifically rooted profession. And I don't know what the closest equivalent here would be, whether this is a clinical exercise specialist or rehab experts, but this is a scientifically based physical movement specialty that you are dealing with. It's also for our listeners, because a lot of things that start with bio the biohacking or whatever the things are. Typically, when you add bio to something, it's has nothing to do with science nor medicine, or probably doesn't work. But biokinetics, like there's a huge difference to this, because it takes the best elements of sports science and medicine and rehab and clinical physiology and combines the things that work into one profession. So I can imagine that what you have just outlined would be difficult to communicate even to people who are familiar not just with the language, but also with the anatomy and other things. So in practical terms, can you give us an example of how difficult that could be? Because if I would try to explain it to my 10-year-old child, is that a similar level of expertise, or is it even harder? Because if you don't have a concept of what maintenance means, how do you do this?
Very, very slowly and with visuals. The easiest way for me is at my practice, I've got diagrams of all the different joints. So mostly orthopedic wise, we deal with low back pain, something with the knee, something with the ankle, or something with the shoulder, like the way most people do. I've got to physically get close to the patient. They give me written permission that I'm allowed to physically touch them and manipulate their body into position that it's supposed to be. And then I like touch on them, like here must relax, here must squeeze. And if I speak English the way I'm speaking now, they don't understand a word I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I've got to physically change my accent to sound more Afrikaans, basically. Otherwise, you can forget about it. You're going to get a blank stare and nobody's going to understand what you're saying. So from even the way English is presented or transferred from me to someone else has to be within their frame of reference. Otherwise, it is simply not understood. To answer your question, it's got to be tactile and it's got to be visual. It can't be verbal, because you're absolutely going to lose the person.
And do you only work with people who had previous injuries or require rehab, or do you work with healthy individuals who want to get better, stronger, fitter, achieve above, let's say, be fitter than they are currently, rather than restore the function? Talking about improving function or going about what supernatural would be?
All of the above. How biokinetics works here is we can only see patients who were referred by a doctor. That's so that we can claim through their medical aid, which is like medical insurance in the United States, as I understand it. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but basically, if you pay for a medical aid, they give you a certain amount of annual benefits to use for physiotherapy, for chiropractic, for biokinetics. This is labeled under auxiliary services. And then we've got for, let's say, anywhere between 12 and about 30 sessions during the year that we can work with a patient. So it's from the referral, the doctor can say for whatever reason. So it could be for a chronic condition. It could just be somebody wants to exercise, they have a medical aid, and then the doctor just writes for biokinetics on the referral letter. And we do have ICD-10 codes that we can use for patients like that. Just say lack of physical exercise or something like that. And based on that, we can still claim through the medical aid, but they just want to get fitter, get stronger, lose some weight. It's mostly just for weight loss.
And when you work with those patients, are you still finding that the same sort of communication challenges are there, or is that a completely different type of client?
So Windhoek is the capital of Namibia. We've got, to my knowledge, about 1.2 million people. The entire country is just 3 million people. So we don't have a lot of people to work with. So in the specific area of the city that we are, it's mostly a low-income area. And to give you an idea, I've got 2 white patients. One is a German guy who's the #1 squash player in Namibia, and the other one is my cousin. So that basically doesn't count. So the language barrier is still a thing. It kind of depends on the person's education level as well, and what type of world they've been exposed to, what work they've got. If it's someone who grew up in the northern area of Namibia, it's mostly rural villages. There's no cell phone coverage. The most advanced cell phone anybody's seen is one of those old Nokia 3310Is, and they walk to the closest shebeen, which is like a bar, 2 days from their village to go and charge the phone. And there's no electricity, there's no running water. So it's rural. This is Africa, guys. And that's the reality for basically half the country. So to communicate adequately to those people what is relevant and helpful for them, to make them buy into that what I'm offering you or why you're here with me is beneficial for you, is difficult, because the
Yeah.
only thing that matters if you're from that world is how much rain did you get? Is there enough food for the animals? And
Yeah.
does the hut still keep the rain out? So the basics of survival. For
Mhm.
people in the city, it's different. People who grew up here, it's different. Frame of reference is better. The ability to communicate and understand concepts is better. But
Mhm.
regardless of where the patient is, still my job to help. They still came to me. And I need to be able to find the connection point, wherever that is. So be that wherever it is, that's part of the fun, that's part of the challenge. And I see it as a privilege to be able to find where those connection points could be. And in the end, if I manage it, to see the smile on the person's face and when they have a pleasant conversation, if we can get there, it's lovely, man. It's really cool to see somebody just have a bit of a brighter day because there's some sort of positive influence.
What I find very interesting is the approach you mentioned. Namibia, yes, of course, being a relatively poor country, and I think it's a former German colony, I think under South African administration for quite a while.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, people, as you mentioned, no electricity, no water, food is sometimes a challenge. People worry whether it rains inside the hut or not. I understand that. But on the other hand, you provide services that are not really implemented in Europe. So, for example, using exercise as medicine or prescribing exercise as a way of managing conditions is not widely used in Europe. There have been attempts. I think Norwegian government tried to do this a while ago, and sometimes it's implemented or used widely in private practice as one of the 4 pillars of lifestyle medicine. But it is not a widely adopted approach to health. So that strikes me as an interesting thing because it's a fairly advanced approach to managing health and disease. I'd like to learn more about this. For how long has this been the case? How do people respond to it? I understand it might be the only thing that's available, but it's also one of the most impactful things that you can do for your health.
I agree with you that it is. I would argue the most important thing that you could do is we've got very few problems that can't be solved with exercise. And we see that with almost everybody that we work with. So biokinetics started in, I've got to remember this correctly, somewhere in the late 60s. Professor Gert Strydom at the Northwest University, he had a theory that if people who had heart attacks exercised afterwards, that heart's going to recover stronger. Obviously, this kind of information was known at the time overseas, but South Africa was quite isolated during that time. So there wasn't a lot of scientific conversation. So he thought he was the first person. I don't know if he was, maybe not, doesn't matter. So we took 5 patients, all former military guys, all who suffered a heart attack. I think the ejection fraction was all under 30% by the time they started. And he put them through an exercise protocol, and it was all over the newspapers. They said he's going to kill people. And then 6 months in, one patient dropped out. At the end of the year that he worked with, or the conclusion of the study now, the 4 who remained achieved a gold rating on the military fitness test, and the guy dropped out, passed away.
Wow.
So this was how it originated. And from there, we incorporated clinical exercise testing, so stress ECGs, physical work capacity tests. The orthopedic element was incorporated as well. It's the most similar to the exercise physiologist of the American College of Sports Medicine. I think we overlap quite a bit. There might be a bit more orthopedic component to what we do. So it's, in a way, it's like physical therapy in the States. I think the clinical component, what we do with regards to the ECGs, bear in mind, this is my opinion. This is not the opinion of the Biokinetics Association or anything. I'm not a fan of a stress ECG, especially not one done on a bike, because I don't think I can get that much useful information. So if I could give my 2 cents on what we should lean more to, is more towards the physical therapy. Why it's not done in a Western sense, at tinfoil hat, so that big pharma can make more money. But I don't know, man. I think it's more widely accepted here in our culture. I think that being physically active, being outside, being in the sun, our climate allows it more as well. A lot of work here that does involve physical labor, being outside, building stuff, working with trucks, farming, the works. So we've got to be more physical. And I've seen people in their early 30s with stress fractures, with back fusions from being borehole drillers, or lots of physical work. So perhaps the value has been realized more. I can't tell you why it's more done here versus overseas.
The reason I find it extremely interesting, Awie, is because there's sufficient evidence available, as you said, for decades now, of the value of exercise in human health. Like, for example, the VO2 max is a stronger predictor of mortality and morbidity than smoking status.
Yeah.
And I think it's twice as much, right? And that's just one. And when it comes to rehab or recovering from injury, this is kind of obvious. But exercise has documented benefits for type 2 diabetes. You've mentioned cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, all the plague of the Western world right now, the metabolic syndrome, coronary heart disease. These are obvious. And then all these things that other people suffer from, like lower back pain, right? Osteoarthritis, osteoporosis as well. But you may argue that musculoskeletal diseases, that's obvious. But what about things like depression, anxiety, cognitive impairment? The cognitive decline slows down if you remain more active. Lung diseases and lung condition, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease improves with exercise, regardless of how damaged your lungs are. Cancer-related fatigue. And some even say that there's certain types of cancer, because of the reduced inflammatory response over time, there's an acute peak in inflammatory response short after, but then there's a sharp decline for 24, 36 hours following resistance training. Some people say that alone can be preventive, or at least delaying the onset of age-related cancers. So pretty much all the things that people struggle today, in some shape or form or in some way, can be addressed through, or mitigated or delayed or improved by exercise. But this is not something that you would expect to be prescribed or taken seriously enough in many countries. I know that in the UK, the NHS tried to implement something like, so they had an app for getting people off the couch and tried to get them running. But those things are fads. They show up, they disappear. Nobody takes this seriously. Doctors don't take that seriously. And even if they do, then the patients, they'll just find someone who will tell, oh, there's a pill, there's a supplement you can take, right? Oh, you go and you're gonna sit in a chair in a physiotherapist's office, and they're gonna be running electric currents, right, from whatever it is, top of your head to the heel, and that magically will solve all your problems, even though it doesn't. But those things get funded. So let's dig into this. Is this a human nature to expect an easy shortcut, get a pill or a supplement, rather than put the effort in?
I think it depends on the person. In general, yes. In general, I would say for sure. Dr. Todd Lee has a saying that there are two-headed snakes. That doesn't mean snakes have two heads. So you get people who enjoy doing difficult things, who want to constantly improve themselves. And take bodybuilders, for instance. It's freaking difficult what those guys do, but they enjoy it because they love it. And it's in their nature to seek out the challenge. And I think, unfortunately, for most people, it is not. They want to be as comfortable as possible and get as much as they can for as much output for as little input as possible. And that's why you see things like GLP-1s being so popular at the moment, because people think it's a quick fix. And I disagree with that sentiment, especially for the GLP-1 and GLP-2. You kind of need to graduate into taking these things. Like, if you're one of those people who think that a supplement is going to fix everything, then you really, really shouldn't be taking anything, because you're going to be so reliant on whatever it is that you're using or taking. There's a lot of things you can do within your control to improve your health already before you almost qualify to take this medication or to take the supplement or whatever have you. Would it still be beneficial to use certain things like retatrutide, SLU-PP-362, methylene blue, whatever? Yes, it could. But I would say it would be less beneficial if the person isn't willing to do something first. And like you said, that's part of human nature, and it's a big challenge that we sit with. Our education and our experience gives us the privilege to be able to work with people on the mental side of it as well. So we did sports psychology. Our undergrad is either human movement science and physiology or human movement science and psychology. So I did the one with physiology, and a lot of my colleagues did the one with psychology. So they've basically got a degree in psychology, not to practice as psychologists, but as the clinical background. And it gives you a bit of an advantage to be able to relate to people in a different way and find out which buttons to press to get this person to understand that, okay, to get something, I've got to have to do a little bit of something, get off the couch and just move a little bit. I think for most people, it's the fear of doing something that they're not familiar with. And perhaps they think it's much more difficult than it actually is. Like, I don't know about you guys, but exercising 45 minutes 3 times a week it's nothing really. It's really not that difficult. Like for me, it's harder to do less than it is to do more. Maybe because it's in my nature to exercise. I like it, but it's still, at first people think it's terribly hard. And even with my patients that I work with, the first couple of sessions, they're sore and the body's all creaky and feels weird. And then after 2 weeks and barely even feel it anymore. It's not like we're not slowly scaling it up, but I would rather have them be consistent with easy basic stuff and still move around than make it progressively more difficult. So it's like we said earlier, you've got to meet the person where they are, not where you wish they were. And perhaps as healthcare professionals or as people in the fitness and longevity space, we've just got to figure out where to meet those people who we would call couch potatoes and figure out how to make it fun.
Your approach is completely different to, I think, what many people are used to, I think, at the moment. There are 2 things that you have touched upon. The first one is meeting a person where they are, right? And that's vastly different to where majority of the people take exercise or sports advice or movement advice from. At the moment, for vast majority of the people, it comes from social media. And social media is designed to compare you to the ultra competitive, ultra fit, part of the population, show you how inadequate you are, and then push you to buy something, subscribe to this app, use this as if it was solving your problems. And you're still sitting on a couch, scrolling on your phone, spending your money, nothing happens, nothing changes. You just deepen the sense of inadequacy. It's opposite to meeting people where they are and actually helping them from the point from where they really are, drawing that map from where they are in life to where they want or need to be. The second thing is, you've mentioned 45 minutes 3 times a week, right? Yes, you're right. But an average person in the UK spends 5.5 hours a day on their screens, on screen time, non-work related. So scrolling through apps and social media for people between the ages of 16 and 25 is 5.5 hours. And I think it's increasing a day. So just to put things into context, right? Or into perspective, no, it's not hard, but yet the vast majority of the population fails to do that.
I spoke about this with my wife yesterday, where there was someone on Andrew Huberman's podcast who said you need to grow by doing hard things. And I wouldn't say my critique, but my opinion on this would be our definition of hard is different for every person. So the guy had this example of he grows by doing hikes, and he had to make it progressively more and more extreme to get the desired result. Your hard and my hard is not the same. Yeah. If you're someone who enjoys running will not be hard for you. I despise running. I don't enjoy it at all. If I'm being chased by a lion or a hippopotamus, that's a different story. But
still better to fight it than run away, Awie. Still better to fight it, yeah.
Depends on if you've got a friend with you and he's wearing flip-flops and you're wearing running shoes, then
you might go for it. Yes, yeah.
He can take the picture.
Yeah.
Anyway, so depending on what is your definition of hard, it's going to have to be from a place of recognize what is hard for the person who's in front of you. It might already just be difficult for them to recognize that they need to change. And I would argue that most people who are couch potatoes, who are inactive, who are sedentary, who don't feel good, who are in permanent cytokine storm, who chronic inflammation, I think most of them deep down know that it's not sustainable to carry on like this. But the thought of change is scarier to them than actually implementing the change.
Yeah.
Number one, because of how do you get the right type of input, the right type of knowledge? And then 2, how do you not make it overwhelming that you think you've got to start training for 2 hours a day, 6 times a week, and cutting all carbs
Yeah.
and, living like a monk, basically.
Yeah.
And that's, again, getting down to meeting people where they are in a controlled medical setting like what we do, I think would be beneficial for more people overseas, because it's safe. We don't expect the sun, the moon, and the stars from you. I just expect you to do something. Some people with me only exercise once a week. Some do twice. Some do every day. It's literally different for everyone depending on what you are capable of doing. If somebody is in meetings all day long and they need to reschedule, you know what? Life happens, man. It's okay. The gym's not going anywhere, and live to fight another day.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And I think that, so again, two important things you've touched upon, right? The first one is this comparison plague to others, right? That is very easily now, let's say, done to people. But if you're sitting all day, even standing for 10 seconds, standing up and sitting back again, it's better than sitting all the time, right? That's still progress, but yet a lot of us fail to see it that way, because we have this expectation that we put on ourselves because of the constant comparison, that it suddenly has to be, 2 hours of high intensity work and the best available gym with top equipment. And that's not how it works. And the other thing I remember that you said I quite liked, again, it's this incremental progress that people would like to substitute for the real progress, right? The supplements, for example, they can work. There's a place for them, especially as we're getting older. But that's like closing the missing 5%, right? Maybe 10% for some people. That's not the solution to the problem. Like the 90% is elsewhere. The 90% is your effort that you will be putting in. And it only makes sense to do once you already get the basics covered.
There are regular exercisers, but they piece it together themselves, or they put themselves into a community of people for accountability and motivation, external motivation, essentially. But at least there's some consistency there. And then you have this group of people in the longevity space where exercise is no longer necessarily about just daily movement. It's like this very technologically advanced analysis of your movement. People are doing ice baths and different types of massages. If you're a regular exerciser, that's like the next level. And even that's not really sustainable either. The value of consistency and small steps is very difficult even within those different groups. So I like that you mentioned it's really just about consistency. And I've never taught or been in a fitness class where somebody didn't at least feel a little bit accomplished in the end, even if they just sat and breathed. And, it's not about that. It's about consistency. How do you have those conversations with people where maybe consistency isn't even in the language either, or maintenance, and it's really just going from 0 to 1 and not 0 to 100, and not comparing yourself to others, and also not comparing yourself to an unrealistic version of yourself either? I know a lot of people who, for their 0 to 1 might be that they just take one less trip to the fridge today. And that's huge progress. Maybe they put their steps somewhere else. It doesn't require deep analysis and scans and technologies to be able to achieve extra decades. But it also is taking the basics of human physiology that hasn't changed and then bridging them together so that it's not even about the exercise anymore. It's about valuing the next small step. So how do you do that?
I have a saying that most people understand. The best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time is now.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so for them to realize that everybody here understands nature, fortunately, because we all grew up in it. We all see it every day. We're very fortunate that we don't live in the same concrete jungle that you get in the States. Like, you can go out in the sun anywhere, and we've got loads of sunshine all the time. It's more of a privilege than we realize, I think. You very seldomly see a Namibian who isn't pretty tanned. Regardless, that makes my frame of reference of connecting this easier. So then people get the point of, okay, it would have been better if I have a 65-year-old lady who's got back pain. She's been a teacher her whole life. She's retired now for a couple of years. And the back is at the point where the orthopedic surgeon told her that she's got pretty severe degenerative disc disease. The x-rays show that there's severe degeneration. We can focus on the negative of, okay, got a pretty hectic problem here. Or we can say, okay, you know what, auntie? You're here now. You can still move. You don't need crutches. You don't need a walker. You can move. We're here. Let's just do what we can and see if we can enjoy it. Tell me about the most interesting student you've had, the naughtiest guy in class. Tell me that while you're doing your stretches, or let's just have a little bit of a conversation while I'm teaching you how to do this. And the important thing with a patient like that would also be a little bit of home exercises. And that's where people get it wrong a lot of the time. If you can't give someone something that takes less than 10 minutes, they're not going to do it.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
please, for anybody listening, if you work with patients or you work with clients who need to do stretches or exercises or anything around 10 minutes or less, or else you are wasting your time. It's not going to happen. So getting that relatability of, it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is that you start.
Yeah. I think another thing too is the practitioners. I mean, physiotherapists maybe are an exception, at least sometimes, are some of the most unhealthy people themselves too. I mean, if we're talking also about demonstrating what it means to be healthy, and you're taking your advice from a fitness instructor versus your cardiologist versus a physiotherapist versus longevity people, they're not necessarily the most physically or mentally well either. So do you think humans also pick up on that gap, and maybe unconsciously? And how important, I mean, you exercise regularly, but it's also part of the nonverbal communication with patients. So I think that that's also something we see is, if you see a doctor, your PA is struggling too. So there's the huge gap there.
How it usually works in our cultural space here is you are 90% of your marketing. So if people don't recognize the brand that you work for, they recognize you. So they don't care what your business's name is, they know you. So my practice can be called whatever I want to call it, but everybody will speak about the person working there. So they'll speak about me. My dad was a manager of the liquor store at Trade Center in 2000, I think many years ago. And people didn't go, they didn't talk about going to Trade Center. They talked about going to Albert. That's what they said. So that's the personal connection that we're very fortunate to have. And I'm eternally grateful that the Namibian culture is like that. So that is the number one connection point, is the type of person that you are, the energy that you carry, the way you treat people. That's the first thing, that connection that you speak of. And then it's also, you've got to live what you're trying to sell. I'm not listening to a fat dietitian, because what? Are you kidding me? Come on, man. If I'm speaking to someone who's supposed to be giving me advice on how something is supposed to function or how something is supposed to work, if I'm listening to a mechanic whose car's always broken, like obviously there's a gap there.
Yeah.
And this is very similar. If I'm constantly getting injured, or if I'm overweight, or if I'm not healthy, or if my blood work doesn't look great, am I really applying what I know? And if that's the case, if I can't apply it on myself, how can I make it applicable to my patients, or to anyone that I'm trying to teach? Because then there's a gap between the theory and the practical application. And I love what Alex Kickel always says is, if the theory doesn't translate into practical application, then it doesn't matter. There's got to be that marriage of the science and the anecdote of what you read in a book versus what you see. Matt, I listened to one of your guys' podcasts where you said, who are you going to trust to do your heart surgery? The guy who's read 5,000 studies, or the guy who's done 50 surgeries? Obviously, the guy's done the surgeries because he's living it.
Absolutely, right? That's lived experience. But I think Western culture is very good at abusing this. right? You will have someone, random person pops in a white coat and a stethoscope on Instagram and starts talking about health, giving an impression, because
Yeah.
we learn to trust people we don't know, right? People we've only seen on a screen on our phones. They take a random guy from the gym. Okay, here's a supplement you're going to push, and people say, "Oh, he's so strong. That must be the reason for it," right? So this isn't a very easy system to crack or hack into your human brain if you don't truly personally know the people you work with.
Yeah.
It's also interesting what people are seeking, because, so for example, part of what we do a lot of lifestyle medicine, which is essentially using nutrition and exercise as ways of improving health. And a lot of the questions that we get from people at the beginning of it, oh, what scans am I going to get? What technology is going to be new? All these things, right? It's actually the opposite, right? The more expensive our programs are, the less tools and technology is being used in them.
More
Paradoxically.
human. Yeah, because it's more
Yes,
human.
exactly, right? Because that's where the results are. That's where the impact is. Yeah.
Yeah, and another reason I mentioned the practitioners, because perception matters, like you said, 90% of your marketing. But there's also a gap in education, even among practitioners too. The practitioners themselves, they're not necessarily being educated or care to be able to provide that too. So where does continuous learning and education fall within your philosophy?
In my philosophy, uh, I'm I'm a bit of a strange guy. I'm extremely curious about everything. My wife asked me, is there anything you don't want to know? And I keep responding, no. I want to know everything and try and understand everything. And even if I can't figure something out, at least I'm asking the question. And the freedom to ask, the freedom to question, the freedom to explore the nature of not just biology but of reality itself is,
Mm.
I think, a fundamental part of us as humans. Where if you have that curiosity, the odds of you finding the answer are better than somebody who just accepts things at face value. So with regards to the GLPs, if you look at the clinical research versus the anecdotes, you're going to find a pretty large gap. Look at the people who were studied in the clinical trials, and then look at the people who usually
Exactly.
use GLPs. There's a
Yep.
pretty big gap. If you're only looking at this functional population, even the blood work norms that we look at, it's mostly based on dysfunctional adults, not necessarily on healthy, optimized adults,
No.
or especially when we work with, or when I listen to bodybuilding podcasts, or I'm a really, really big fan of the sport, and the whole pharmacological side of it is very interesting to me,
Mm.
because if we can understand that extreme of it, we can translate some of the basics down to Gen Pop as well.
Mhm.
So that's why I think understanding extremes is a very important thing. So even if I am passionate about cycling, I would like to understand what it takes to win the Tour de France, because that is the most extreme it can get. And from there, you translate what's relevant back to your weekend warrior. And to bring this back to what you were saying about the education is, we need to, I think, give more value to N=1 case studies, where guys were pretty meticulous about the way they carried out the blood work, gathered the data, gathered the information, and
Mm.
see if there's a middle ground between the thousands of case studies that we have
Mm.
and the clinical data, and see how does this translate to practical application of the patient who's sitting in front of you right now. Is it better to do the once a week administration like done in the studies? Is it better to microdose? Because if you look at the studies, you've got to do it once a week. Whereas if you listen to every single anecdote that I've read, which is thousands, everybody who uses it once a week gets extreme side effects. And if they split the doses, they feel a lot better.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's where the clinician has to use sound clinical reasoning, be the reasonable expert, because in the end, the patient is your responsibility. What you give to the patient, it comes down to that you are responsible as the expert for what you prescribe or what you suggest to the patient. So if you as a doctor are giving your patient 1.75 milligrams of semaglutide per week, which I've had a patient who was on that, which I think is absolutely absurd, then
Mm.
you're responsible and you've got to understand what are the implications of this. If you give a 30-year-old lady who's otherwise healthy, other than the fact that she's got less willpower than a sea cucumber, 1.75 milligrams of semaglutide per week. What do you think's going to happen, man? It's not going to be a positive outcome. And that's going to be on you as practitioner. It's not the patient who's injecting herself with this stuff. It's you, because you wrote the prescription. You are the doctor. And that, I think we shouldn't outsource responsibility. We shouldn't outsource guilt from, I don't want to say guilt because it's, that implies that somebody is directly guilty of doing something wrong. It's like that old analogy of who's more guilty if someone was killed, the guy who pulled the trigger, the guy who made the gun, or the gun. It's a long possible debate, but in the end, you as clinician should understand whatever drug you're giving your patient and weigh the pros and the cons. And in your sound clinical reasoning, the pros should outweigh the cons so that this will be worth it to the patient despite the side effects that they might encounter. Whether you're giving them statins, whether you're giving them beta blockers, the type of medication is irrelevant. If you're a prescribing practitioner, this is on you. And there's no excuse to not know that.
And it used to be like that, but now it becomes all based on algorithms. There's this is a lab value that you're looking at. This is what you prescribe at that dose, and everything that deviates from that becomes a problem. Because if something goes with the patient, not the way, and again, not every disease can be cured. Not everybody responds in the same way. If anything happens, your license to practice, it's going to be taken away from you, right? Your ability to make a living, and so on and so on. So many doctors that I know no longer work with patients in the way that you described. They just follow the algorithms because that reduces legal risk of medical practice. But that's not medicine anymore. Yeah, unfortunately.
Because you're not using clinical reasoning then.
Exactly.
Then
no longer. Yeah, you're just following a script. Yeah,
you're basically working like a large language model then.
Exactly.
And the moment we take clinical reasoning and sound clinical judgment out of medicine,
we're taking it away from everything at the moment.
Precisely. Then you don't have the patient's best interest at heart in the end.
Exactly.
And I realize in the Western world, it's very difficult because there are lawsuits galore over there. The most ridiculous things are people getting sued for not thinking, guys.
It's a hobby for people. Yeah.
For some people, it's a way of making a living. Yeah.
Those people should really come to Africa and try that stuff here. Like it's gotta be comedy gold.
The price, but it is. You're right. It's the price of comfort that in the Western economies, it becomes, as you said, generic and largely unhelpful. And everybody's just focusing on protecting what they were been building, not about how they can help another human. I think the GLP-1 is a fascinating story, right? We talked about this just when they were becoming more, again, these are not new drugs. They've been discovered in the 70s, but they're just becoming more popular right now and very widely used. But if someone doesn't understand even the basic fact that if you take the substance where you constantly feel full, the moment that substance is gone, things are going to get worse because it's the opposite of what your training should be. Becoming comfortable with feeling a little bit hungry or eating less than you should. Once that signal in your brain is disturbed, your behavior, once you discontinue the drug, is going to go the opposite way. And we've been warning about this, 2-3 years ago? Now there's huge amount of people now who have lost a lot of body weight. That's body weight means fat and muscle, and then rapidly regain everything as fat. So not only they lost a lot of money and a lot of time, they've lost muscle mass that will be very difficult to recover, and they weigh what they weighed before with 5, 7, 10% less starting muscle mass. And that means that now to maintain what they started with, they need to eat, 30% less already. Right? It's just going to get worse. And that's just basics, right? Because we know what happens if you don't eat.
Yeah.
And what are this is. And you're right, the clinical trials, severely obese population, pretty much all of them with type 2 diabetes, and all of them in a clinical trial, in a controlled daily, whatever the recommended guidelines were, with physical movement and exercise and so on and so on. And they still regained all of the weight they lost at the discontinuation of the drug. But that is often skipped or forgotten or ignored because, again, now the population's got a quick fix, which they believe they can use for eternity. They can't, right? There are cases, legal case now has recently been brought against the manufacturer in the US because of the cases of blindness. in people
Yeah.
using it chronically, right? Pancreatic risk, thyroid risk, like all those things are now starting to pop up, right? And like we will pay, the society will pay the price for quick fixes, right? They never worked in the history of
And,
humanity, right? The quick fixes never worked.
and the sad part about even the whole lawsuit thing for me is I don't think it's the problem with the drug. I think it's just the application. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
in my opinion, semaglutide should not be given at a higher dose than 100 micrograms a week. And even then, depending on the context, I wouldn't use it for weight loss or insulin management because that's not what it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
I would use it to treat addiction problems.
Addiction. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of the case studies that I've worked with is if you use a low enough dose, you actually get an increase in appetite because of the glucagon signaling. So
Absolutely.
I'm on 1.875 milligrams weekly, along with tons of other stuff. And I'm not experiencing any appetite suppression. That might also be from growth hormone and MK677, all those kind of things combined. But it's helping me maintain my physiological parameters within the parameters I want to keep them, like my blood sugar, while pushing other things so that I can get better results for my specific journey. So it's all context dependent, like you said, but people will tend to demonize this because of
Yeah.
incorrect application. I'm seeing a similar thing with SLU-PP332.
Yeah.
Alex Sickle was a big proponent of using it in a very low dose, and I'm more leaning towards that side of the argument where this thing is very chemically strong. Some people can get away with 250 micrograms a day.
Yep.
Like I use 250 micrograms 4 times a week. If I take 500 micrograms, I feel terrible. It's too much.
Mhm.
Of
Other guys
course.
can take significantly more, but you can't say you need to take 4 milligrams per kilogram of body weight based on a clinical or based on
Yeah,
an animal
because
study.
that's
That
what
is,
yeah, absolutely.
and
But you
that's not
see,
sensical.
but what you see that what your approach is highly individualized, and you are
Yes.
aware of the fact that if you would change something about the way you live your life, let's say you change the frequency at which you exercise, you change the things that you eat, you will need to adjust the dosing as well, and your
Yes.
behaviors. This is completely different approach to what is happening more broadly with generic online given prescription following a script, right?
Yes. Yes.
It's like it's a completely different way of using pharmaceutical compounds for specific individual benefit, right? But people try to replicate this by they found something online. Oh, I'm going to do the same thing. Well, it's not going to work for you, right? Because it
No.
depends on your age, depends on your sex, depends on your daily routine, when you wake up, when you go to sleep, what else do you take, what else you don't take, what you eat, how you exercise, right? And
And
there's no
even your
way to
genetic
do this.
response.
And your genetics,
Exactly.
exactly,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
you cannot
Yeah.
predict this out of thin air, right? There, you need
Yeah.
to either have a very deep understanding of what you're doing and how, or work with someone who can guide you through that process. And it's not one off;
Precisely.
it has to be on an ongoing basis. Yeah,
But
Yes.
but Avi, you also have, you said, you're working towards something specific as
yeah,
well, that
Yes.
you're using
Yes.
those and you're curious and you're experimenting on yourself essentially, but not in
Yeah.
lieu of the lifestyle, the basic lifestyle habits
yeah,
that you then build on top of. I think a lot of people
Yes.
see it as a replacement for something else, not, but are also maybe not clear on what kind of health they're really looking for too.
Yeah.
So that's also unique.
It comes down to what I said at the beginning as well, where you need to graduate into using these things by doing the basics first. So would it be wise for us to say that for the general public, this drug is currently used in an incorrect way? Yes. Does
100%.
that mean it's a bad drug? I don't think it's a bad drug. I think it's being incorrectly applied. The same way with if you do testosterone replacement therapy incorrectly, then you might have some bad outcomes. That does not mean it's bad. It just means it's applied badly. It's
Of
like
course.
driving at the speed limit versus driving 200 miles an hour. It's the concept or the action is the same. It's just the application is different. So what I'm worried about in the future is that we're going to have several very, very, very useful context-dependent molecules getting a bad rap or getting a bad name because people are applying them at scale
Yeah,
incorrectly based on either poor adherence or just bad interpretation of science.
Yeah.
And I hope that doesn't happen, because we might lose access to these molecules in the process, and that would be pretty sad.
But that happens, and that has been happening, and that will be happening. There are multiple examples of those things going on. And you can take any area of the pharmaceutical space. There's been drugs that have been discontinued or got a very bad reputation purely because of its abuse or misuse rather than the appropriate application of them. Yeah.
And then it's picked up by underground labs, and then you don't always know whether you're actually getting what you're getting. Take GW501516, for example.
Yeah.
When it first became studied, it was found to be the best lipid modulator on the planet. And then one terrible study showed that it caused cancer, which I still think was very manipulated. And then they changed that lipid modulating property without changing the chemical designation. And now you're kind of getting cardarine, but you're not getting cardarine.
Yeah.
That's just one example.
Yes, but that happens with mainstream drugs as well. Similar fate happened to the hormone replacement therapy in women as they go through menopause, right? It's got a very bad rap of a completely misinterpreted study it's ridiculous, right? And that leads to hundreds of millions of women losing muscle mass, losing bone density, losing the best decade of their life to the way they feel, they function, they think or struggle with, and purely because of, again, for no reason at all. Yeah.
And that comes down to you as a practitioner need to be educated. And that's why I'm grateful for people doing the things that you guys do, with the attempt of educating as many practitioners as we can. I don't think the general public needs to be that educated. I think coaches, doctors, longevity experts, however, the people who influence the public need to be more educated than we currently are. And that's not a process that ever ends while you're still alive.
Right.
Because the nature of our understanding of reality and of biology is constantly changing. Robert Edward Grant would say, every fact that we know is just a facet. Because you don't understand the full picture. We can barely see what's going on around us of the full electromagnetic spectrum. So we can do the best we can with what we have, with what we know, while continuing to expand that. But that is every practitioner, every coach, every person who has influence over the public should always keep learning, keep improving, keep making sure that you are giving the best possible advice for the person in front of you so that they can live their best life, basically.
Fully agree. Yeah. Is longevity and lifestyle medicine used as a term in Namibia?
I don't think directly. It is done, but it isn't. In the circles I move in, I haven't interacted with it much. To give an example, there's one doctor I know of who has a peptide clinic. I don't know how much he knows or what he does. I know there's a compounding pharmacy in Namibia who manufactures this stuff, but I think they're pretty much clueless. So how good the products are is up for debate. I haven't seen the third-party testing of it, but just with the way they're describing the stuff, I'm thinking, oh, guys, can we not read Wikipedia and copy-paste it into our descriptions, please?
Right.
You should know better. So is it used? I would say probably yes, but it is not described in the same way as it would be in the States or in the UK. There's not a lot of people doing the infrared sauna thing, red light therapy, all that. Not because it's not beneficial, but mostly because people don't yet understand the value of it.
But lifestyle habits, do you speak with your patients about this too? I mean,
yes.
In addition to, going back to the basics and simplifying, that at least is
yes, because
Yeah.
there is a degree of generic advice that would be in one way share perform better probably for everyone, right? I mean, let's say for people who are, let's say, obese, reducing the overall intake is probably beneficial. For people seeking any type of dietary advice, increasing the fiber you consume is probably a good thing. For people who are sedentary, increasing the number of hours you're not sitting, or walking is probably beneficial, right? So there must be some generic advice that is shown to be very likely to be highly beneficial for you.
Yes, that's like what we spoke about on the bell curve.
Yes.
There is advice that is applicable for the largest number of people underneath the bell curve. Not for the two-headed snakes, but for snakes in general, if I compare
Yeah.
people to that for this example. So in my context, the biggest problem that my population has is alcohol consumption. So yeah, I can almost say 7 to 8% of my patients do not consume alcohol. The rest is substantial, to say the least. And it's a cultural thing. So over the weekends, the traditional thing is on Fridays, I wouldn't say the partying starts, but the drinking starts when the football game's on, carries on. If the team loses, they drink more. If the team wins, they drink more. I don't exactly know where it comes from, but I would say that is the biggest lifestyle limiting factor of my specific patients. Even more than the diet, even more than the sitting, because we all know how bad alcohol is for you,
Yeah,
especially
it's poison.
in large quantities.
It's multi-organ central nervous system poison, right? So it's
Precisely.
of course, yeah.
Yeah, and drinking 2 glasses of wine every night during the week and 12 beers over the weekend, nobody can tell me that's a good thing.
No.
You've mentioned methylene blue in a conversation earlier today. It was kind of interesting because it's old as Earth, and it's been used in medicine widely for multiple reasons. I think it was even used for, was it also the old anti-malarial, I think, at some point?
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was the, so, and it's now, there are some places now where it starts to resurge again in the Western world, and mostly for the brain function or brain benefits. So I was wondering what your take on this is, because it's free, it's available everywhere. It was very popular in Eastern Bloc, like Russia and all the satellite republics for a very long time, completely forgotten and ignored in the West. And I always found it, so I first came across this information when I was in med school, and why not to use this and say, oh, it doesn't work, it doesn't do anything for your brain. But the reason, and it's relatively safe, but you shouldn't be using this because it causes serotonin syndrome when you combine it with SSRIs. Well, but if it does, it clearly has a significant impact on whatever is going on in your brain, right? Because if it increases your risk of developing serotonin syndrome, it must have an impact on serotonin receptors, production, or metabolism in some shape or form. Therefore, it must have measurable impact on some of your cognitive functions, right? But it's never discussed, used, or talked about this. Just don't. So, what's your take?
I think I know what the boost of the cognition that you get from it is, because when you look at the electron transport chain, it uncouples complex 1 to skip directly to complex 4. So if you've got a bottleneck at complex 2 or 3, it's completely bypassed. So
I thought
this is obviously not
the one and 3. I thought yes,
it bypasses 2 and 3.
To
my knowledge,
could be.
So it jumps from 1 to 4. So if you're using something like metformin, you're probably not going to get as much of the mitochondrial downregulation effect that you would normally get, because metformin blocks it at complex 1. So that's why I'm personally not a fan of using metformin long term for everyone. So everything is case dependent. If your mitochondria are functioning great, or you could even cycle the metformin. The idea is to keep your mitochondria functioning as optimally as possible. So
don't forget, metformin we're discussing, because it's often used as a life-enhancing or lifespan-enhancing compound, one of the kind of a miraculous longevity drugs, right? Typically dosed at 500 to a gram a day permanently.
Which, I don't completely agree with that because of the effect on the ETC and the mitochondria. So
there you go.
If you don't look at the mitochondrial level, then sure, but you've got to look at that, because we all know by now that mitochondrial health is, in my opinion, one of the main drivers of staying alive and increasing your health span rather than just your lifespan.
So I would love to do something cool that we've never done on this before, but since both of you experiment yourselves and you're very well versed in the longevity and lifestyle medicine, can we do a lightning round between Maciek and Awie? You have to choose between 2 options. Give your verdict and maybe a short reason why, but you can only pick one of the 2, and then I'd love to hear why. Okay, ready? The first one.
Okay, that's tough. Okay.
What's better for sleep? Daily magnesium or a consistent bedtime?
Consistent bedtime.
Consistent bedtime, no doubt about this.
So for people who are replacing their bedtime or they have a different schedule and use magnesium, what advice might you give them?
Learn how to meditate.
I can talk about magnesium supplementation for hours, because that will depend on the formulation, on what it is, what form of magnesium, how it, what salts of magnesium you're taking, whether it's even going to get absorbed. I mean, it has a small incremental benefit in people who are deficient, yes, but it's tiny impacts compared to consistent bed timing. It's negligible. It only makes sense if you already have the many other basics covered. Then we can discuss it. But otherwise, it's a futile conversation to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not a big enough needle mover, I would think.
Next one. Ready? What is the bigger mistake people make for their performance? Stacking supplements or ignoring their cognitive load?
Ignoring cognitive load.
Absolutely. No doubt about this.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand on what we're really talking about? How do you measure your cognitive load? But have you experienced this, and how do you pull yourself out of that loop?
With silence.
Oh, okay.
So we actually spoke about this yesterday as well at our meeting. We had about 15 different biokineticists, and almost everybody said the same thing, that you're speaking to someone for the duration of you seeing them. So for the whole day that you see patients, you need to be friendly, you need to interact, you need to give energy to them. And you need to learn the balance of how much of myself am I giving, or how much am I facilitating for this person to either express the difficulties that they have, to talk about, to just be themselves. And I need to facilitate them to be in the environment where they can be comfortable and be themselves and be positive. And that doesn't mean I have to give my energy. Most of us, you only learn the skill a little bit later on. I was fortunate to learn quite early in life. But my cognitive load would be if I'm dealing with people who are incredibly negative, who can only communicate in grunts and noises, which happens. If I've got people who constantly emotionally drain me, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you feel that your response to your patients, where you would usually be warm and friendly, you start getting a little bit shorter. I wouldn't say impatient, but you don't listen as well as you could. My wife is my practice manager, so we work together all day long. And normally in my interactions with her at the end of the day, or by the time we get home, I start noticing, okay, this is how I know I need to take a few hours, or just do one of Joe Dispenza's guided meditations or something, just to reset to myself. So that would be your response to situations where you would normally be normal. Well, once you start acting a little bit more childish, then you know something's off.
What is better for your long-term brain health? Metabolic training or strength?
This is a tough one.
I think it's very easy. It's easy for me. I think okay, let me give my answer first then. So go. I think the strength training is by far the more important.
For long-term brain health.
For long-term brain health, yes.
I don't know. Like, I haven't looked at it yet. I think it depends on what you enjoy as well. Like, physiologically, I don't know enough about it. So I'm keen to hear Matt's explanation of it. But if you're someone, I don't enjoy strength training, like, at all. It hurts, man. Like, I think I've had too many injuries.
I'm fully aligned with you. Yeah.
If you're old enough for you.
I do more zone 2 than I do strength by far, because I just enjoy it more. As you said, I don't feel like a failure every time and for the next 2 days, every time I try to lift too much. But on the evidence, I think when it comes to the established associations between the long-term preservation of cognitive function, resistant training beats everything else. Like the link between muscle mass and strength, not just the amount of muscle, but also the strength, is very strongly coupled to brain aging, and dementia risk directly correlates with strength. So that's one. The other thing is all the other benefits that you're going to get from improved insulin sensitivity, IGF-1 increases, and so on and so on. And also the loss of strength and loss of muscles precedes cognitive decline, and never the other way around in pretty much every other human. So that would be my answer. Now, metabolic training, there are plenty of other benefits to it, right? And it does benefit your cognitive function primarily on the vascular and the mitochondrial mechanisms, no doubt about this. But again, if I could be only allowed to do or recommend one thing, and you're not allowed to do anything else, then it would be 2 strength training sessions a week. And they would need to be heavy enough to force production of new muscle, or at least prevent you from losing your muscle as you're aging, would probably be the single biggest one.
I just want to make sure I understand the question properly. So if we're talking about strength training, are we talking about the lower end of the rep ranges to train specifically for strength adaptation, or are we talking about resistance training with weights in general?
So it's a great question, because there's a difference between probably the opinion that I have and the evidence that there exists. So when we talk about the available evidence for preserving cognitive function, it's resistance training in general, but it has to be a resistance training that prevents muscle loss or builds extra muscle, right? It depends on your age and what you're capable of. That will be different. The interesting correlations that I also see in literature is with the raw strength that you have, not because it's not necessarily only tied to it. It does correlate with the amount of muscles you have, but there's more to it. So my personal thing would be strength training for the increase in raw strength, as my personal opinion. However, the evidence says any type of resistance training that preserves or builds muscle is probably better. Well, it's clearly better for maintaining long-term cognitive function than metabolic training, although they're both much more significant. It's probably best to do both, to be honest, because they will compound. You get much more than 1 + 1 in that case, if you manage to do both.
So if you do strength training type of routines where you get between 3 and 5 reps, you're going to get that central nervous system adaptation of recruiting more muscle fibers. So that benefit you're going to have. But the clinical evidence so far suggests more that as long as you get significant enough stimulus in the muscle to cause hypertrophy, to actually accrue new muscle tissue, and thereby increasing your muscular strength as well, not just for the specific strength training reps. So say you do between 15 and 20 reps in exercises, so more higher reps, then you're still going to get similar type of effect and adaptation, even though that direct adaptation of recruiting more more muscle fibers is going to be slightly different.
Yes, it's going to be different, because there are 3 mechanisms in literature in strength training. So the pure preservation of muscle mass is coupled to brain aging and dementia risk, as I said, but there are the others, right? So let's say the insulin sensitivity and glucose disposal, it doesn't matter how you do this, right? It's so for example, 15, 20 reps, just as good for that element. And again, the IGF-1 increases, again, you know that it crosses the brain barrier really well, supports neuroplasticity too. It comes from any form of resistance training, right? You can get it from both. So again, there's and the overall reduction in your systemic inflammation and frailty and so on. And so they're predictors of cognitive decline, and you achieve them in both. You achieve the last one also with metabolic training too, right? So if I had to make a choice, do both. But if you can only do one, narrowly for the preserve of the cognitive function, it would be strength training. But it's one of those questions where if your brain is in great shape, or is in a great shape, but your heart doesn't pump the blood the way it should, it's not going to work too, right? You kind of need both. You cannot only take care of the of the thing that will improve your brain and neglecting your body in the meantime, because if the heart stops pumping the blood, what's the use of the brain, right? It doesn't work like that. You need both, and in reality.
But with a healthier brain, it's choosing to do the next thing that's healthier for the heart later, right? What is a greater return on investment? 10 minutes of daily movement or 10 minutes of daily emotional regulation or mindfulness or indexing?
Wow.
Return on investment. Yeah.
On your time investment, right?
Well, however you choose to interpret it. Avi, what is your answer?
This question kept me up all night last night.
Oh no.
No,
Oh.
I've debated with myself like the whole day, and
Mm.
I think movement wins every day of the week. Like it's got to be movement. However,
Wow.
the reason I'm saying this is because while doing the 10 minutes of movement, you are still going to get some positive emotional effects from
Yeah.
the movement. You know, oxytocin secretes, all that. You might not get physical benefit from emotional regulation. Let's call it meditation. If I'm as skilled at meditation as Dr. Joe Dispenza, that's a different story. However, I am not Joe Dispenza. So I'm not going to get all those benefits from the meditation that I would get. I'm not going to get both the effects from just the meditation. If you're skilled enough, yes, then I believe that you certainly can. We've seen in Dr. Joe's work that there's fantastic benefits that is capable of being achieved by the meditation. But for the average person, for the majority of the bell curve movement, I would say it's no debate.
Mm.
Great question. So I wish I spent more time looking into this, but I think I need to agree with you on this one. 10 minutes of a return of investment. So let's say I spend 10 minutes and I only can do one thing. Let's say I choose walking. I'm not doing either, I assume. And I can only do one of those things. The first thing is, once you're moving, that can be meditative in a way or mindful in the first place. So it doesn't have to be either or, but when you only meditate or when you're only mindful, then you're skipping that element. The second thing is 10 minutes of movement will give you immediate like system level effects, right? We talked about your blood flow is going to change, your cerebral blood flow is going to increase, your insulin sensitivity is going to change, your muscle brain signaling going to activate. Sleep probably is going to improve as well. So it's probably a better choice, narrowly, I would say. And I also agree with this, that if you're not practiced, if you have never spent time with yourself in silence, then it's very easy for what was supposed to be a mindful moment to become, 10 minutes of rumination or something like that, which will actually have the opposite effect. Well, it's difficult to get things wrong with movements. But this is one of those things where you have to choose one in isolation. I think that's, ideally you do both, right? You need both. It's not that you do, you need both of those things. However, I think that if you only have to choose one, you can walk, and you can walk while being mindful too, right? You don't have to take a phone or, headphones and, go with someone. You can do that thing in silence as well. So if I had to choose one, it would be probably 10 minutes of movement in terms of the return of investment, because I clearly can get more benefit from it that way. Yeah, it's a good question.
What's the most underrated habit intervention that you consistently see in the field?
Underrated habit or intervention?
Yeah, what's underrated?
Sleep.
Yeah, I agree. Sleep and sunlight.
Sleep and sunlight.
Ooh, interesting.
The improvements I've seen we've got a lot of friends overseas, and most of them come from countries where if you have to look at the sun, you've got to picture it from memory because there's clouds all the time. I mean, you guys in the UK would know what I'm talking about. There was actually a former Australian cricketer who painted a picture for the Queen in 1957, I think. And she told him, I don't think you caught the sun quite realistically in this painting. And he said, Your Majesty, in this country, I have to paint the sun from memory because it's never out. And we've seen, I've seen people become different humans by spending a week in whether it was South Africa or Namibia, whatever, just being outside, being in the sun, clean air, better quality food. Like we actually get grass-fed beef here because it's illegal to not feed them grass. So like no cow in Namibia is allowed to eat corn or maize, to my knowledge.
Well,
So
neither should be humans, but yeah.
yeah, for that matter. So the taste of the meat is so different that if an American eats a steak here, they're going to think it's game. But like, no, dude,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's
your
true.
meat
Yeah.
is just fake, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the environment lots of different factors, but I would say number one is just the sun. Even for myself, our practice is inside a mall. So from the time we walk in to the time we walk out, we don't see the sun at all, which it's not fun. I'm not going to lie.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
when you
Oh,
do get in
there's
the
been
sun,
some
then over the
sunshine. We had
weekends,
some sunshine
it's
in April, here in the UK. Yeah.
Oh.
I know every now and again you do get a summer's day where there is a little bit of sunshine, but
Yeah.
yeah, I feel sorry for you, man. It's not the same. The fish and chips you guys get is quite nice, though.
And what's overrated in longevity or lifestyle medicine?
Over
Supplementation.
the counter, oh yeah, over the counter supplements. Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, I really don't think there's much that really moves the needle apart from creatine, and even that is
True.
much more minimal than people think.
Yes,
Because
I agree. And it's probably it's probably the only one that you can blindly take and expect positive benefit from it. Yeah, I think this is the largest over promised, overhyped, very little benefits for most people from over the counter supplementation in general. I'm yet to see one. We actually have an interesting one to test. I'm not going to talk about this today. That's something that has been specifically formulated in a way that I have never seen before, and it actually has potentially some promise. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. But in general, yeah,
Mhm. So
over the counter supplements, I think maybe vitamin D for people living
Yeah,
in Britain,
Mm.
folic acid for women who are pregnant. Yeah, I agree to this. But otherwise, unless you have specific needs or deficiencies caused by either disease or inability, genetics, or whatever that could be, that's
perfect.
by far the most overhyped thing ever.
That's not to say that you don't get things that are useful depending on the context. I
Yeah.
Yeah.
think if plasmalogens were more widely available, they would probably be the biggest needle mover you could get from
Mm,
anything over the counter.
Mm.
The problem is in Africa, it's completely impossible to get them. If I'm not importing them directly from the
Mm.
States, I can't get them. I've got a friend who has a peptide company
mhm,
and he can get the raws of the plasmalogens, but he says it's going to take him like 11 years to sell all the products because nobody knows what they are.
mm,
So there's just no way for us to get them. We're
mm.
only now approaching the point where BPC, TB500, and GHK copper is available.
Mm.
I'm I'm not even aware of doctors doing hormone replacement therapy for men at all.
Wow.
For ladies, it is being done, but
Mm.
ancient protocols where they still
Yeah.
give us synthetic progestins instead of progesterone, which you talked about, Matt, like that study was poorly interpreted. Um,
Yeah.
so we're still pretty far behind. In South Africa, it's being done much more openly. Peptides are being marketed on social media all over the place because let's just put it this way. South Africa is like the Wild West. You can do pretty much whatever you want.
Yeah.
There are, from a legality aspect, the government has a lot bigger problems than worrying about someone selling peptides.
Uh-huh.
They're pretty strict in Namibia, though. I don't know if it's legal, if it's not, if it's even something we can classify as a supplement. I've got absolutely no idea.
Wow.
It's a hot topic and then it kind of backs off a little bit. It also depends on time of year too. That might be
Yeah,
things are advertised in different ways right before holidays versus especially around peptide for different markets. There's
Yeah.
what I see
yes,
from my bubble is marketing peptides for menopausal or perimenopausal women now, which never used to be really the case either. So it seems to just be cycling through the different subpopulations, but
yeah.
I'm but no science.
And the thing is, the science is there if you know what data to look at, because
Right.
there isn't as much clinical data, but the N of one data that you've got is in the thousands, probably in the millions. Obviously,
Yeah.
the rigor with which we get this data isn't as strong as a clinical study, but it's what we got,
Mhm.
and it's better than nothing. So, to give you an example, Alex Kickel has over 16,000 case studies on BPC, and that's the oral and the injectable. And to disregard that because it's anecdotal, I think would be unwise. because well, what else are we going to use?
So if you could wave a magic wand and have something appear or disappear from either your work, your practice, the field, what would it be?
Appear first. I wish more people knew the value of what we do, specifically doctors. I don't think there's enough awareness of the other medical fields. I would make it that the whole world knows what we do and the value we can provide. That would be my make it appear. And make it disappear. In my field would be that the academics don't run the field anymore because they've completely out of touch with reality.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
I think you guys have had similar experiences over the years where a practical field like medicine or whatever is being regulated and being run by people who've got absolutely no practical experience, no I've forgotten the English word, apologies. They've got no anticipation, no feeling for the work. So for them, it's an abstract concept. It's not real. It's not anything more than words in a textbook. And there is no place where theory meets application, because for them, everything is theory. For them, application is theory. And that does not help the profession at all. To give you guys an idea, in my year, there was 170 applicants and we were 25 who were selected. In the year after me, there were only 15 people selected and the applicants were over 300, because that was the last year we were still doing the old 3+1 degree. Then they changed it to a 4-year degree where you've got biokinetics and sports science included. And you've got the professional internship that we have to do afterwards is also included. So you've got thousands of hours of practical experience. So the first year they started was 2018, 2019, completely different course. 2020, completely different course. 2021, completely different course. So they changed it into something else every single year. So then how can you have consistency in the profession, for one? Because there won't be consistency, because what you have been taught will be completely different. How does the public expectation of us change based on the 2017 people know something else, the 2018, 19, 20. Every year, there's a completely different frame of reference of what we as professionals can provide to the public. It's absolute chaos. The agenda for it, I don't know. Even if they explain it to me, I can't tell you because I've muted them in my head because they're not making sense. It is detrimental to the profession that we do not have people in private practice or any form of practice shaping the future of where we're going.
Yeah.
Because you've got no idea of what is really happening, boots on the ground. And I don't think that's constructive. So if we could get more input from private practitioners over the course of where we're going, where we're headed, and what we want to be as profession, I would add that.
And that's probably applicable to a lot of people who are trying to make a real difference, real change.
There's a reason we no longer work in academia, the both of us. Yeah, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
We recently wrote on our blog this long post that this illusion of knowledge that people have because they accumulate information without any practical understanding or ability to apply it in practice.
I watched your video on that. It was really good.
Yeah,
But it's true. But even when we're talking about the hours people spend on social media, it gives them this pseudo confidence or pseudo education, but it still doesn't make an impact necessarily. So
none.
It's almost similar to the Dunning-Kruger effect, where you basically know the surface level of something and you think you're an expert. I mean, that happened to me as well when I started learning about bodybuilding and pharmacology, where you know a couple of names of steroids and suddenly you think that, hey, I'm an expert, I know everything, because 99% of the population doesn't know. Meanwhile, you don't know anything, dude.
Yes, but the illusion is strong, right? I think it's a powerful effect. I think becoming aware of this is just learning that, and awareness that what you feel about what you think you know is very deceitful to everyone. That
Mhm.
awareness, I think, is something that everyone should have, especially when you're starting on any type of a new journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sooner you accept that you basically know nothing, the more constructive it's going to be, because then you're going to be more open to learn new things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
I think the most important thing in our field is the
Mm.
willingness to be proven wrong.
Yes, if you already think you know everything, there's how are you going to
Yeah,
learn?
it's
Yeah.
precisely.
Mm.
And even if you think you do have a good grasp about something, someone else might have a different bit of the information or a different grasp of it, or just different practical application
Yeah.
experience that makes it different from your frame of reference. That doesn't mean it's wrong. That just means it in this context is different. And
Yeah.
by integrating something that's different to your own worldview might just expand your worldview instead of shattering it.
Of
And
course.
that's, I think, a quite constructive way of thinking about it. Like if we
Exactly.
disagree on a topic, I would
Exactly.
want to know why. And please explain it to me so that I can understand it from your point of view, so that I can get smarter in the process.
Yeah.
I
Well, a
love
lot of
this.
people are not approaching exchange of ideas that way.
Unfortunately.
Yes, I love this. That it's not going to shatter. It's going to expand your worldview. I think the only thing it's
Yeah.
going to shatter is your ego, if anything, right?
Precisely.
If you allowed it to go to, yeah, it's
Mhm.
going to expand your worldview. I love this.
Mhm.
Okay, so
And
quick
it's
answer.
I like the short answer and then maybe the longer one, but is human health really that complicated?
short answer, no. Long answer, yes.
Yeah, I think it actually is. I think it's far more complicated than we give it. It's a good question. I think it's complicated in just a different way than we automatically anticipate. Yeah.
I think getting to a basic level of quote unquote healthy isn't that complicated. So if you don't want to push it all the way to 100%, like most biohackers do, then getting to a state of kind of acceptable health, I don't think that's very difficult or very complicated, because you don't have to do a lot to get there. The further you dig, the more complicated it gets, and the hole stops getting deeper when you put down the shovel, because we don't have all the answers and we're still
Yeah.
figuring it out. And
Yeah.
what we thought we know is completely different to what we knew 2 years ago, and it's going to change again, and it's going to change again, and it's never going to stop. And that's part of the interesting thing. So yes, I agree with Matt. It is incredibly, incredibly complicated, but getting to a state of acceptable health, I think is not that complicated.
I agree. I think that's true. You can get 75% there, maybe even 80% if you get your eating, movement, sleeping, and eliminate the poisons. You're probably
Yes.
80% there.
Yeah.
However, for a lot of people, closing that remaining 20% gap remains a challenge, and that probably half of this is still unexplored, and half of that requires a lot of in-depth, personalized approach to people in order to close that. But you should only be thinking about doing it once you get the basics right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So we have a very new tradition on this podcast, Avi, where a previous guest gets to ask you a question, not knowing who you were going to be, and then you get to ask a future guest a question. We got this question from two previous guests, so it's something people really want to know. Two parts. First part is, what advice would you give to your younger self? And the second part is, what broad advice would you give to younger people?
Okay, to my younger self, would be twofold. Don't give up. And the other part is for all young people, stop caring so much what other people think. It's your life. You've got to be able to look back 50 years from now and be satisfied with what you've done and what you've achieved and the type of person you chose to be. And if you're going to formulate who you are based on what your perception or what you believe others perceive of you, which might not even be true, you're going to miss out on a lot of beautiful things in life.
So Avi, where can people find you? If someone is interested to get in touch with you or learn more about you or ask you a question, where they can find you?
So I'm on Instagram. My business is Spies, SPIES_biokinetics. I'm personally on Instagram as well, but if you want to ask a business-related question, you can go to the business page. I do have a couple of videos on my YouTube channel. That would be the way to go.
Super.
Cool. Great.
Thank you, guys.
Well, Awie, thank you so much for this conversation and connecting, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more to catch up on in the future, but thank you so much for sharing your experience and your vision for the future.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast. I hope we get to do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Solutions Manual podcast. Please subscribe, like, leave a comment, or share with your favorite brain.